Hello, everyone. Jill Finnis, Pinnacles Prep. In the spirit of Juneteenth, Pinnacles Prep would like to make the following statement public. We believe that Black lives matter. For Black, Indigenous, and other people of color, also known as the global majority, the events of the last few months represent a daily experience for some. The murders of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, and now Rayshard Brooks, as well as countless others who have come before them, are not isolated random incidents. They're the products of systemic racism that underlie nearly all parts of our lives, whether you can see it or not. White people have benefited from systemic racism for centuries. However, the global majority has been stifled, and some have suffered the gravest of consequences of it. More importantly, for our context, systemic racism continues to plague our education system. So in light of these events, I wanted to surface some of the commitments that the Founding Board and I have made to authentic anti-racist practices at Pinnacles Prep. These practices are literally written into our performance framework that we're evaluated on by the state of Washington. So in other words, if we aren't meeting our diversity, equity, and inclusion goals, I'll refer to them as DEI from here on out, our charter is literally at risk of not being renewed. So I'd like to quote our charter application today so that you know our commitment. To ensure that all students thrive, regardless of background, culturally responsive practices related to DEI must be at the heart of all we do. Culturally relevant teaching practices are incorporated into Pinnacles Prep's instruction and are the key lever for eliminating opportunity gaps, especially for traditionally marginalized populations. So you might ask, well, how are you going to measure this and make sure it's authentic and not a token statement? Well, to quote, members of our student and parent advisory councils will create and monitor a playbook that describes what DEI looks like in action, so that patterns of systemic racism that perpetuate the opportunity gaps that exist in our community are disrupted. This DEI playbook contains benchmarks for school environment, policies, procedures, and instruction. It ensures that a range of Latinx histories, cultural context, and lived experiences are respectfully, intentionally, and authentically incorporated into our school day, along with other systemically underserved groups, experiences such as low-income students and students with disabilities. It includes key performance indicators, KPI, such as staff diversity ratio and discipline data proportional to student demographics, how we recognize, respond, and redress bias and discrimination and locate it within a larger social change work, how we cultivate and sustain equity work, and how we develop our staff in relation to DEI. All of these things will be key performance indicators, KPIs, that we will measure. But you might say, so how will we make sure our playbook is authentic and not just a token piece of literature? Well, we've designed a study team specifically for this, which is a formal working committee designated to provide leadership and accountability around implementing educational opportunities, policies, and programs that further racial equity in the school, with a particular focus on reducing and eventually eliminating disproportionality and discipline. Pinnacles Prep's DEI study team is comprised of Student Advisory Council and Parent Advisory Council members, and will be led by me, the principal. This team will convene quarterly to assess our progress toward the KPIs outlined in our playbook. And this team will also create action plans for KPIs that are not progressing. As an additional layer, we'll use an instrument to measure our commitment, the Panorama Equity and Inclusion Survey. At the beginning and end of the year, we'll use our survey, and the DEI study team will have this tool in place for them to help us make decisions or address issues that surface. We take our commitment to decolonizing the educational community really seriously. It's a daily practice for me as a white leader to constantly check and leverage my privilege at the same time so that every human who walks through our doors feels safe and included. We see our students as assets. Their histories and lived experiences are not only important to the work we do, they're integral. And to that end, we're excited to open our doors in fall 2021 to a diverse group of scholars who will author and iterate on these policies that I'm talking about, that are going to hold our whole community accountable to anti-racist practices and the greater vision of diversity, equity, and inclusion in our school. That vision that lifts up all kids in our community. So I look forward and I'm fully committed to listening, learning, and co-constructing with our whole community.